Well, welcome everyone to this International Coaching Week event. I'm Carissa Gay, past president of ICF San Antonio, and this is truly a Texas-wide event. So to kick things off, I want to introduce my fellow president, Lindsay Hinari from ICF Houston.
Thank you so much. I guess I will be heard and not seen, and I'm perfectly okay with that. But I'd like to welcome all of you to today's event, From Reality to Possibility. Wow, if that isn't a great description of coaching, how coaches and organizations reconcile with reality and create what's next. As Carissa mentioned, I'm president of the ICF Houston chapter. I hope some of you were able to join us for yesterday's kickoff event, where we were joined by ICF Global's heads of professional coaching and strategy. And I mention that because, like today, this was a collaboration among the 16 ICF chapters in the Southeast region, masterfully hosted by ICF San Antonio. Thank you. And today's event is possible due to a collaboration across the Texas chapters for International Coaching Week. From sourcing amazing speakers and educational opportunities to sharing our resources, knowledge, and skills as chapter leaders, all of us, both members and chapter leaders, benefit when we can come together as a group. Although this is the first time the Texas chapters have come together for International Coaching Week, it certainly won't be the last. This is the beginning of future collaborations, and I'm excited to see what we can accomplish as a group representing the great state of Texas.
Thank you, Lindsay. It has been wonderful to collaborate with you in putting this together. And next we have Michelle Lopez from ICF Greater Austin. And Michelle, we will make it sure here that you can turn on your video. Are you able to do that on your end? There we go. Get technology in sync here.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here with everyone. And my name is Michelle Lopez. I am the chapter president for ICF Greater Austin. And it is my pleasure to recognize those ICF chapters whose leaders have collaborated to bring us today's timely and dynamic program. It's members and leaders of these chapters who volunteer to bring their time and talents so that we can have programs just like today ready for our community. Those 4 chapters who have participated in collaborating and planning for today include the ICF Greater Austin chapter, the ICF Houston chapter, the ICF North Texas chapter, and the ICF San Antonio chapter. So thank you very much to each one of you who have put this program together for us today.
Thank you, Michelle. It's wonderful to partner with you, our sister chapter. And now I want to turn it over to Susanna Clavello, who is the current president of ICF San Antonio, to give us a little background of why we're here for this panel today.
Good morning, and thank you, Carissa. Welcome everyone to this international event that we are so proud to collaborate with the other Texas chapters. Today's topic is one that many organizations can relate to. We're talking about budget cuts, stress, uncertainty, communication and collaboration challenges, and the pros and cons of working from home, just to mention a few. The pandemic has certainly been a testing period for all. What did we learn from it? And how will we move forward to continue evolving as organizations and as individuals and as a society? That's what we will discuss today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Susanna. And this conversation does seem so timely in light of what we've been through over the past year and a half and really pivoting to what's next. We're coming out, yet there still is so many questions. And we want to resource organizations, leaders well, in order to remain strong during these challenges. And one of the organizations that has been such a huge champion of coaching and developing people is CPS Energy. And we are extremely proud to have CPS Energy as a sponsor of International Coaching Week. So at this time, I'd like to bring on Chichi Anianwu to speak on behalf of CPS Energy.
Good morning, everybody. This is Chichi. On behalf of CPS Energy, I'd like to thank you all for putting all this together and giving us an opportunity to live out our core philosophy, which is people first. With people first, we're about people development, and we like partnering with our communities, such as ICF, to further that people first philosophy. And with things like this, we can send our employees. I, as an employee, can participate and take it back to the organization. So we are honored to sponsor ICF San Antonio with 2021 International Coaching Week. Thank you. I hope everybody get something from this and take it back to the organizations like I plan to do.
Thank you, Chichi, for representing CPS Energy, but also just representing that commitment to invest in people and truly put people first. And we're excited about today's conversation because it really is a look at how can leaders help the people in their organizations move through the current challenges and have the resources they need to continue to thrive in what's next. So before we jump into our panel discussion here, I have a quick question to put out to all of you in our audience. What do you see as the most pressing challenge facing organizational leaders today? And would love to see your thoughts in the chat there. Make sure that you're putting it out so everyone can see and comment on the different ideas here. Employee wellness, says Cora. Certainly burnout is a huge factor across many organizations. Organizations are facing budget issues, building culture, understanding the changes that COVID has brought to us all. Yes, much change has happened and the pace of change continues to accelerate. Overwhelm, keeping up with the change and everything going on. How to navigate this new quasi work from home hybrid work environment. What does that mean in terms of communication across organizations? Mindful leaders. Yes, leadership awareness is so crucial for the environment that creates for the team. Diversity and inclusion continues to be a topic that's affecting the interaction and even that cohesiveness within the team. And all of these are significant issues that will probably even come to light as we dive into our conversation today. So thank you for sharing your perspective on what it is that leaders are really wrestling with in this time. Well, with that, it is my very great privilege to introduce our distinguished panelists today. You are in for a real treat with the rich background that each one of them brings to the conversation. And as I got to know each one of them over the past month, I was impressed by their dedication and passion for their roles, but also the common threads that I saw even across their different stories. So as I give you a brief snapshot of each of our panelists here, listen for what you see as the common threads, and would love to hear your thoughts on that in the chat. What are the themes that you see in these different leaders that we're going to be hearing from today? First, we have Brigadier General Laura Lenderman here in San Antonio, and she's the Director of Plans, Programs, and Requirements. and the headquarters of Air Education and Training Command here at Joint Base San Antonio. And what that actually means is that she's responsible for a $7.6 billion annual budget that's supporting 60,000 personnel that are training the United States Air Force Airmen and international partners across 22 bases. She graduated from Duke University, and after her initial pilot training, she served several tours flying the KC-135 Stratotanker. And I looked that up so I could have a picture of what does this Stratotanker actually look like. And it's a refueling aircraft that expands the strategic reach of other aircraft in accomplishing their mission. And what a picture of what Brigadier General Lenderman is about in developing people and expanding capacity. So we are thrilled to have her on our panel today. Next, we have Steve Sosland, who is the Chief People Officer at Texas Tech University. All of their university systems in West Texas and beyond. But really, he's a professional disruptor. Organizations consult with him when they want to renovate their culture based on core values. And that means having a conversation to identify what values really represent the people in that organization. It's not just the leaders putting some qualities on the wall, but it really embodies what that organization is about. He's an alumnus of the United States Military Academy at West Point, Boston University, the University of Texas, Dallas. But really, he's an avid learner across many disciplines, and all of that fuels the work that he does to develop people across the Texas Tech system. So we are thrilled to have Steve with us as well. And thank you for keeping me organized with the slides as well. We have also, they're out of order, my apologies. Here is Steve Sosland, all the way from West Texas. We are thrilled to have him as a part of our conversation here, here today. And then our panel, whoops, flyaway slide, also includes Alicyn Yarborough from Austin, Texas. And she is the CEO of Glimmer of Hope, which is an international nonprofit bringing community development to rural Ethiopia. And her focus there is really on providing sustainable agricultural development so that the people have the resources and the health and the ability to really create ongoing sustainability for themselves. And her deep commitment to providing these resources for Ethiopia has driven her to create strategic partnerships, both here in the US and across the world, in order to support Ethiopia. So we are excited to hear her perspective as a nonprofit navigating through the challenges of the past year. And going back here just a moment, we also have Dr. Julianne Cenac, who is the Executive Director of Talent Development at UT Health. And she has worked in a global sphere, whether it's China, Singapore, Europe, India, Middle East. She has served in a management consultant role across multiple organizations and led strategy projects for as diverse opportunities as the Department of Defense, National Institutes of Health, and Department of Justice. Really, when it comes down to it, she's about helping people develop their leadership. She's served as an executive coach for hundreds of executives and has an upcoming book, the focus of which is on emergence, the natural process of becoming a leader. So we are in for a real treat here today as we hear from all of these panelists. So I am going to bring each one of them onto the screen here, and we are going to dive into our conversation. Welcome to our amazing panelists here. We are truly honored to have you be a part of this conversation, and you should be able to have your videos on there. There we go. Truly across Texas here, we get to have this collaborative conversation. And I'd like to address the first question to General Lenderman here in San Antonio. As a leader of a major organization, what realities have you navigated through over this past year, and how are you moving towards what's next there at JBSA?
Well, Carissa, thank you so much for first the kind introduction. That was amazing panel that you put together. I'm honored to be a part of this group. So, and thank you to everyone that's online today, just joining us for the conversation. And I'm really excited to actually be a part because I've been a recipient of executive coaching in the past, but I've never been in a forum like this where I can actually learn from the experts. You know, it's usually just been a one-on-one experience. So I'm really excited to hear about everyone's experience with coaching and how it's improved their personal, professional, and organizational lives. But to your point, what has been going on? I think that you'll hear a common theme among our panelists, perhaps. But for us, you know, I was in the commander of the 502nd Air Base Wing last year before I moved into this position over the summer. And we were smack dab in the middle of the COVID I'll say response. You know, we were one of the first people or first organizations in the country to deal with it, because we were asked by the Department of Homeland, Health and Human Services to house and care for those that were coming from Wuhan province in China, and then later on the Princess Cruise Lines. So they came to San Antonio, and working with the city here, which was very gracious in being able to support these American citizens that needed help. But that really gave us a running start for when COVID became really within our fence line. And so what I would say is, speaking strictly from a military perspective, and this job in particular, being a part of the 502nd, and then now as a member of the Air Education Training Command staff, you know, our number one job was to keep that training pipeline open while we're working and fighting through a global pandemic. Because when we shut down our training pipeline, there's ramifications for years and years to come. It's not something that we can just catch back up really quickly. And in a couple of months, it'll take quite a while, and that has a direct impact on national security, because every airman in the Air Force comes through San Antonio on their way to their duty station. So we train quite a few people over the course of a year, almost 40,000 folks. So COVID was definitely the challenge of the year, and keeping that training pipeline open and learning the protocols, learning what worked and what we could adapt and how quickly we could adapt. And it was just an exciting and a challenging time to be here in San Antonio. Luckily, we were surrounded by some amazing thinkers, and I'd love to speak on that later in the conversation. But you know, we saw innovation in processes, and we saw innovation in how we deliver training, how we deliver education, all the homeschool learning or the remote learning that we were doing in our public schools, we were also having to do in the military as well. And then also taking care of those essential workers on the installation. We were having to turn on a dime and take care of our child care development center workers, our food service folks, our lodging folks, civil engineers, everybody that had to keep coming to work in an environment where they just didn't know what to expect and what the health risks were. So as a commander, that's a pretty interesting place to be. It's challenging because you want to, you want to provide as much safety as you can, but there's a level of risk that you're assuming for your force, and you try to take a measured approach to that. But at the end of the day, you do the best you can with the information that you have. And on the heels of COVID, the other aspect of our last year that was definitely transforming was the George Floyd conversation and the incident and how we reacted within the military. And that was already a conversation that we had been having within our force. And George Floyd brought it to the surface once again and put a spotlight on it. And we are as strong as our airmen within our organization, feeling included and feeling they belong. And so having these tough conversations and these critical conversations has definitely been another aspect on top of COVID or within COVID that has really been a challenge for our workforce and our commanders, kind of making sense of what's happening in society and then how that impacts us in the military. Two other things I want to talk about briefly is on top of these two major changes, external changes and internal changes, we also received, or we had a change of administration within the country, of course, with President Biden, and that has a direct impact on the military as he is our commander-in-chief. So adjusting to the new administration and his priorities has also been an interesting aspect of this past year. Talking about violent extremism, again, how do we make sense of that? Sexual assaults, that's a priority for the administration. And also a declining defense budget that you mentioned earlier, declining budgets. And then lastly, within the Air Force, we have a new chief of staff too. And so he has come in with a new vision, a new direction, and the reality of the fact that we're switching or pivoting from a 20 years of conflict in Afghanistan and Iraq and moving toward a focus on the Pacific with China and also Russia, and what that means to our force and how quickly we can pivot to that new fight.
Thank you for that snapshot. And in all of that, there's a theme of the uncertainty and the risk that can't be avoided. Yet as a leader, it's really about creating safety so that people are able to navigate through that well and have the resources they need, both internally, but also around them to be able to move forward. Let's go next to Alicyn with Glimmer of Hope. Tell us about the realities your international nonprofit faced this past year.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Also, just want to start with saying what an honor to be here. And amongst these panelists, I am definitely, it's clear that I will learn a lot today with the expertise that is here. So I really appreciate being included. Let's see, with obviously the reality of COVID hitting, there's already inherent challenges with having an international office, an office overseas, and the communication challenges that are present within that. And so the remote piece was one immediate impact, and dealing with that when there were significant challenges in Ethiopia around consistent challenges around internet access from home, when working from home, power outages. And so navigating that while trying to keep a team cohesive and in strong communication was really challenging. And then the next layer of sort of in line with what Brigadier General Lenderman was saying around the ramifications of pausing or stopping. And we had to really assess, the work that we do is really life-saving work for the most sort of remote and rural areas in Ethiopia, dealing with extreme poverty. And so the reality of looking at pausing the work while we assessed sort of the what the impacts of COVID would be, and making sure that we were keeping our teams safe and keeping our community safe. And there was just the sort of the balancing of the implications of pausing and not getting those services to those communities. And when was the right time to sort of start back up? So we were faced with that. And the next layer for us was that, in the 20 years that we've been working in Ethiopia, Ethiopia has been relatively stable. And with a leadership change in the last couple of years, there was an escalation of political instability that was happening in the country. And that was just, the last 6 months that has escalated quite a bit in one particular area of the country, which again, forced this temporary pause of our work in one part of the country. So dealing and navigating that challenge of, our number one priority, again, to keep our team safe while continuing to do our work at the scale that we needed to do it to reach the millions and millions of families that we were trying to reach. And so there was a real, an ongoing pivoting and reworking of plans, and it continues to be an ongoing thing that we have to do, right? There's not a day that goes by that we're like, we've arrived and here we are and this is the plan. It is an ongoing revisiting of our plans and having to, I think Melinda Gates said this in one of her books or in her latest book around, holding your mission tightly while holding your plans lightly. And that has been sort of our motto over this last year and a half. And the other thing I'll just add is that while I've been with the organization for 10 and a half years, I am a first-time CEO. And so I stepped into this role a year and a half ago, right before the global pandemic hit. So, there was also just my own personal challenges of navigating all of this as a first-time CEO. So.
Well, kudos to you. That's medal worthy right there, to be a new CEO taking your organization through a time of unprecedented change. So we'll look forward to hearing more about your insights from that journey. Would like to turn it over to Steve to share your perspective from just the higher ed space and the realities that Texas Tech has navigated through this past year.
Sure. Thank you, Carissa. And I'm humbled to be here with the panelists and with the participants that are here. And I'll try to share my perspective, although much of it overlaps with Laura, with what you said, and Alicyn, with what you've said. And even when Chi was talking about CPS and people first, I think that's what one of the things that brings us all together from everyone that I've met involved with coaching is that we deeply believe that for organizational health, that we have to put our people first, and so the things that unite us. I think one of the great lessons that was highlighted for us is that the time to prepare for a crisis is before the crisis happens. And so for those of us involved with leadership and those of us involved with coaching, I think the overriding question of today's topic is, what are we doing to either prepare our organizations, if we're internal, or to prepare the leaders who we serve as coaches to prepare for the next crisis? And in terms of what we did within the Texas Tech University system, and as Carissa said, we have multiple universities that fall under our system, just like Julianne has multiple universities that fall under the University of Texas system, and several of those are involved with health. We had a similar thing, albeit just a bit smaller than UT, and we focus mostly on West Texas, although we have a campus in Dallas. So what we did early on, and I guess I should say, like Laura, you started us out, and the two big events that impacted us were obviously the pandemic, and I would broaden it just to say social justice, obviously George Floyd, but just the whole the impact of the reality we should have had for many years, but finally focused on social justice and what were we going to do. But I want to dial back and early on in the crisis or in the pandemic, when we saw what was happening, frankly, or what we saw was happening with the first people coming from Wuhan to San Antonio, we knew that this was going to hit hard in Texas. And so we actually used the military operations plan. And it's interesting. My background is Army, but similar to what's done in the Air Force, is that we had this standard in the Army has this standardized 5-paragraph mission order format, and it's a template of how do you prepare to move troops into an area of conflict. And we were able to use that, but the first paragraph of it talks about the condition of the battlefield. It talks about the opposition. It talks about weather. It talks about terrain. It talks about things like that. So as we approached what we expected to be the upcoming crisis, we said, our mission doesn't change. So Alicyn, I loved when you brought up Melissa Gates' quote, hold tightly to your mission and loosely to your plans. What we said is, going into this, is that our mission doesn't change. Our vision doesn't change for the future. And so whatever plans that we create, we want them to be nimble, agile, flexible, but we're not going to change our vision or our mission, because we still have to figure out how are we going to educate and not just, we have some undergraduate general academic campuses, but we also have healthcare campuses. And we could not afford to slow down the graduation or in preparation for getting physicians, nurses, therapists, pharmacists back into the force, especially during a healthcare pandemic. And we wanted to make sure that we were going to be prepared to lead through this. And so as we looked at it, what we expected to be an upcoming upcoming healthcare crisis was just going to change the conditions we were operating under, but not change what we were going to do. So that's how we chose to do that. So we prepared a 4-phase approach to how we were going to get people safely at home and create a safe environment for them to be able to work remotely, and what were the support systems we would need in place. Alicyn talked about, IT systems. So we really looked at what resources would we need, how would we do that. But as Laura pointed out, we also have to keep the base running. We have to keep the operations on. We have to keep the lights going, the buildings. And so we have essential workers that could not work remotely. How are we going to take care of both? And how are we going to be fair in that? As coaches, on an individual basis, we spend our coaching moments trying to create a safe environment for our coaching clients. As leaders, we try to create a safe environment for all of those stakeholders that we have, our employees, our community members, our patients, who all is involved. Frankly, the process is fairly similar. And that is that we have to have leaders out in front that are calm in their approach, that are giving a clear vision for the future, that are providing clarity, reminding us of our purpose, reminding us of why we're in this, reassuring people that we're going to put safety first and people first and do that. And as a result, we had very few cases of work-acquired COVID. I mean, just a handful. Now we had employees, and unfortunately we had employees who died, but they were community acquired. So we really tried to focus on safety and what to do in response to that. But overall, that was our reality. We have backed off of our phases, and that phased approach we used was before we had guidance from Governor Abbott for state of Texas or President Trump's administration for the federal phases. So our phases weren't exactly aligned. And when we looked at it, we said we can stick to our plan and still be in alignment with the state and federal. So that's how we approached it, Carissa.
It's wonderful to see the themes across the different industries and the importance of having that clear sense of mission and vision, and the distinct strategies pivot based on what the current challenges are. But when you know what you're about, that keeps the focus in view, even during the uncertainty. Let's turn to Dr. Cenac here and hear your perspective.
Sure. Well, thank you. And I echo the comments, Carissa. Thank you so much for having us all and for doing this really important conversation, really. And I am honored to be alongside such wonderful panelists. So my thanks to you. But for us here at UT Health, it's like for everyone, it's been a challenging year. UT Health, as Steve mentioned, we are a part of the University of Texas system. And so we have a threefold mission. It's not only patient care, but it's also the teaching and learning of students and conferring degrees. We have a medical school, a school of nursing, public health, so among others. So it's very diverse, even in that aspect. And then our third area has to do with research. So for us in this last year, located here in Houston in the Texas Medical Center, it has been activating on all fronts on all three of those mission areas, but also being aware of the impact that this last year has had on our employees as a whole. Not only our providers, but our staff, whether it's the accountants, the HR professionals or the IT professionals, the facilities staff that we have. It's been about the holistic concern and care for our employees. So some of the things that have occurred or things that we had to address during this last year, as several of the other panelists have mentioned, have been around not only how do we deal with the pandemic. General Lenderman set up a really, I think, wonderful response to how that installation was so pivotal and so instrumental in the earliest days of the response to COVID. For us here at UT Health, we function, our docs help to support several of the hospitals in this area. So our docs help to staff the Memorial Hermann hospital system, really, and also we operate the LBJ hospital, and we also manage and operate the Harris County Psychiatric Hospital. So for us, we could not shut down in that aspect because the ERs had to stay open. Traumas still happen. Women have babies, and people need heart surgeries, whether it's a cardio or vascular issues. So those things still take place. Elective surgeries, though, were postponed in the early days for us. We also operate an ambulatory care function with our UT physicians clinics throughout the Houston area, over 80 clinics. So that had to also be addressed. So for us, it was this, and this is true for UT Health as a whole, but for us, it was about being very, very customized and very specific about how do we respond to our providers, our hospitalists who need to be there, some of them 24/7. How do we respond for our ambulatory care with those clinics that in the earliest days of the pandemic were closed and then eventually reopened and have been open since? It was a lot of uncertainty. But as some of the other panelists have said, I think Alicyn and Steve mentioned this, you can't wait until the crisis hits to start figuring out what you're going to do. And I think that our senior executive leadership responded beautifully, not only in terms of the pandemic and how do we respond to patient care, how do we respond to our students. We have an international student base that comes here to either go to medical school or to do their training and residency, or even post-graduation. We have postdoc fellows that come in from all over the country, and how do we service them? How are we available to them? So we had to think about that, and we also had to think about the research area. We have a very strong and active research base. So for our bench scientists, they couldn't leave the lab unattended or couldn't leave certain experiments unattended. And so we had to be able to figure out ways to shift and to be specific to everyone's needs. So I say all that to say this, that I think for us, what helped us during this last year, not only throughout the pandemic, not only throughout the social unrest and the uncertainty, but also for perhaps all of us here in Texas dealing with the downturn in the economy, as we are such a big energy, oil and gas state, and recognizing that our employees are, they're multifaceted. Many of them have spouses, they have children. And so, thinking about how do we respond to the whole person was what was central for us. And what helped us do that was our core values. So as some of the panelists have already said, if you have some plans in place, that's fine. But how do you respond to it in a time of crisis? For us, it was relying on those values, and our senior executive leadership stepped up, in my humble opinion, masterfully. And I could not have been prouder to see the response of the senior leadership in terms of how would we support our employees? How would we support our providers who have to be there to do their jobs, have to be in the OR or in the ER to do their jobs, knowing that they may have young kids at home because daycares are closed or schools were temporarily closed. That, I think, was important, but it also was because of the core values that we have that for us focus around excellence and collaboration and patient service. And so we stayed true to those, and we were able to work with others, work with partners throughout the TMC and throughout the state to find ways that we could still accomplish our mission. We were able to put our patients first, but we also were able to take care of our employees, and especially when it comes to burnout and when it comes to the balance, and realizing that some of them were hit on all fronts. Some of them either contracted COVID or were certainly around it on a daily basis. So how do you care for them in that regard? A lot of data shows that women were some of the strongest groups impacted over this last year because they left the workforce, either to take care of kids or for various reasons, and they haven't re-entered the workforce. So we had to be sensitive to that. We had to be sensitive to, the homes and the home life of our employees. And so our EAP groups were, and still are, highly activated to meet the needs of our employees in terms of burnout and other stress areas from the last year, but certainly also the social and economic impact. So that's what it's been like for us in this area. We're both healthcare, but we're also academic medicine. And so that's what it's been like for us in the last year. But certainly, I think leveraging and leaning on our core values has helped us in a time of uncertainty.
Each of these snapshots have really painted a picture of what organizations really across the nation are dealing with in terms of the challenges with just employee burnout and the hybrid work and maintaining safety in the midst of the virus and all of these different things. Yet what makes each of your organizations unique is the integration of that people first philosophy, and even coaching is a specific application of that. So we're all eager to hear what coaching looks like in the context of your organization, what things you've implemented, but also how has that directly impacted the well-being of the organization. So General Lenderman, can you share what has been utilized there at JPSA?
Sure. So thank you. First of all, I loved hearing all the other panelists, just their response to this question. The first question was enlightening, and I wrote a bunch of comments down. So I love the landing on core values, because that is the center of our military culture is those things that unite us. So to speak specifically to coaching, I was thinking as preparing for the panel here about informal coaching that's done every day by, I think, commanders and leaders in the Air Force, and developing that skill. It's almost done subconsciously throughout our leadership development process and all the courses that we take. But what's happening now, especially at Joint Base San Antonio, but really across our Air Force, is a more deliberate approach to coaching. We've realized there's so much value in having folks that have these skills as leaders at all levels of the organization. So I mentioned earlier that I've been able to partake of certain coaching programs throughout not throughout my career. It's been more in the latter half of the career. So as a senior leader, I've had a coach 3 times, one before I was a wing commander, and then twice while I was a wing commander. And so huge benefit for me as a commander, thinking through, having an outside perspective and helping me think critically through some tough challenges without giving me an answer, but helping me get to an answer that was right for the organization. But what is really exciting now is that the Air Force has stood up a working group to create a coaching culture in the Air Force. And it's just in the nascent stages right now. So I wish I had more metrics and data to share with everybody about all the impacts, but we're squarely in the middle of these small group tryouts. And so maybe a year from now, I can come back to the panel and tell everybody the results and how much of an impact it's having specifically in these small groups. But what we're focusing on is the executive level coaching, and then also that mid-level coaching. And then finally, just integrating these coaching skills throughout all of our professional military education and developmental opportunities. So we have a great plan. We're in the middle of it right now. So it's kind of exciting to see how folks younger than me will have these skills that will help them, so when they get to be an older, I guess a senior leader, they will have a different set of tools in their toolkit than I had. Because we're in the military. I know Steve can talk to this or can relate to this, but